The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the kind of self-important energy you'd expect from a group of beings who believed they were the smartest life forms in the universe. Today's agenda item 3007 was Earth's application for membership in the Peaceful Alliance of Civilized Worlds, or as everyone called it, the PACW. Because apparently even galactic bureaucrats love their acronyms. Ambassador Veltar, a crane-like creature with feathers that shimmered like oil slicks, adjusted his ceremonial monocle, and cleared his throat with the sound of a dying accordion. Esteemed colleagues, we gather today to discuss the primitives from the third planet of the Sol system. The humans. The way he said humans made it sound like he was discussing a particularly unpleasant fungal infection. Counselor Grimjaw, whose reptilian features had seen better millennia, leaned forward with the enthusiasm of someone about to share gossip. Our intelligence reports are quite thorough, Ambassador. These creatures are laughably primitive. They still use fossil fuels, have primitive space travel, and get this, they actually keep small predatory animals as companions in their homes. A collective chuckle rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrian representative, a being that looked like a purple jellyfish had mated with a disco ball, pulsed with amusement. Predatory animals? As pets? How delightfully barbaric. Veltar nodded sagely, which was impressive considering he didn't have a traditional head. Indeed, our xenobiologists have identified these creatures as felines, small, apparently harmless mammals that the humans seem to worship. They provide them with food, shelter, and even clean up their waste. It's quite adorable, really. Adorable and harmless, Grimjaw agreed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the recycled air. The humans appear to be pacifists who've been domesticated by their own pets. They spend considerable time making what they call videos of these creatures doing mundane activities. Our analysts believe this represents their highest form of entertainment. The council chamber erupted in polite laughter. These humans sounded like the perfect addition to their alliance, weak, easily controlled, and utterly non-threatening. Director Quills, a porcupine-like being whose species had evolved from creatures that ran away from literally everything, raised a spiky appendage. What about their military capabilities? Minimal, Veltar replied dismissively. They fight amongst themselves over resources and ideology, but their weapons are primitive. Chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, and something called nuclear weapons that they're apparently too scared to use. They've never encountered a species like us. They wouldn't know what to do. Grimjaw's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a bureaucrat about to rubber stamp a decision. Their application shows they're desperate for guidance from more advanced civilizations. They've promised to share their cultural exports, including something called cat videos and memes, harmless entertainment for our citizens. The motion before us is simple, Veltar announced, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd made this same speech 1,000 times before. Do we accept humanity into our alliance as a junior member species, Category 7, subsection primitive but harmless? The vote was unanimous. Why wouldn't it be? These humans were clearly the galactic equivalent of a harmless houseplant, decorative, potentially useful, and absolutely no threat to anyone. As the council dispersed, congratulating themselves on their wisdom and efficiency, but none of them noticed the small addendum in the human application that mentioned their feline companions had something called retractable claws and were natural hunters. But then again, how dangerous could a pet possibly be? Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Whiskers, trying very hard not to think about how his commanding officers had somehow thought naming humanity's first diplomatic vessel after his cat was a good idea. The brass had insisted it showed humanity's lighter side. Jake suspected they were just screwing with him. Approaching Galactic Station Alpha, Captain, reported Lieutenant Torres, his navigation officer and the only person on the crew who didn't snicker every time they had to say their ship's name over the radio. Thank you, Torres. Remember, everyone, we're representing all of humanity today. Let's try not to embarrass our entire species. Jake straightened his dress uniform and tried to ignore the fact that his ship's cat, Mr. Buttons, was currently batting at the holographic star charts. Mr. Buttons was an orange tabby with white paws and the kind of attitude that suggested he believed the universe existed solely for his entertainment. Which, Jake reflected, was probably not far from the truth. The docking procedure went smoothly, which should have been Jake's first warning that things were about to go sideways. Smooth operations and first contact scenarios mixed about as well as matter and antimatter. Ambassador Veltar greeted them at the airlock with the kind of smile that suggested he was doing them an enormous favor just by existing. "Captain Morrison, welcome to our humble station. We are so pleased to meet representatives of your charming little species." The condescension was so thick you could cut it with a plasma cutter, but Jake had been briefed on alien psychology. Play nice, show respect, and whatever you do, don't let them know that humans had a tendency to solve problems by hitting them with increasingly large objects. "Thank you, Ambassador. We're honored to be here." Jake gestured to his small crew. "This is Lieutenant Torres, our navigator, and Chief Engineer Murphy." "Delightful," Veltar said in a tone that suggested he found them about as delightful as a root canal. "Shall we proceed to the ceremonial chamber? The Council is eager to welcome you properly." They were halfway through the formal tour when disaster struck. The airlock to the Whiskers hadn't sealed properly, and Mr. Buttons, being a cat, had taken this as a personal invitation to explore strange new worlds and boldly go where no cat had gone before. The first sign of trouble was a high-pitched shriek from the Zephyrian representative, who was now flashing colors that Jake was pretty sure weren't supposed to exist in nature. "What is that creature?" Veltar squawked, his feathers ruffling in what Jake hoped was surprise and not a prelude to some kind of alien attack. Jake turned to see Mr. Buttons sitting in the middle of the corridor, calmly washing his paw with the kind of focused intensity that cats brought to personal hygiene and destroying furniture. "Oh, that's just Mr. Buttons. He's our ship's cat, completely harmless." Jake started walking toward his pet, but the assembled aliens backed away like he'd just announced he was carrying a weaponized plague. "Ship's cat?" Grimjaw's voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to prom. "You brought one of your predators here?" "Predator?" Jake paused. "He's a house cat. He's about as dangerous as a houseplant. Watch." He approached Mr. Buttons, who looked up with the expression of mild interest that cats reserved for things that might potentially dispense food. The aliens watched in horrified fascination as Jake reached down to pet the cat. Mr. Buttons purred, a sound that in the alien-engineered acoustics of the station resonated like a small engine warming up. "It's making a threatening noise," whispered Dr. Tentacles, the station's chief scientist, whose species had apparently evolved from something that looked like a cross between an octopus and a filing cabinet. "That's purring," Jake explained, scratching behind Mr. Buttons' ears. "It means he's happy." "Happy?" Veltar's voice went up several octaves. "Your predator is expressing satisfaction after infiltrating our station?" Before Jake could explain that Mr. Buttons was about as threatening as a particularly fuzzy sock, the cat decided to demonstrate his athletic abilities by leaping onto a nearby maintenance console and knocking over what appeared to be a very expensive piece of monitoring equipment. The crash echoed through the station like a gunshot, and suddenly every alien in sight was either running, screaming, or in the case of the Boraxian delegate, doing both while changing colors rapidly. "Security alert," announced the station's AI in a voice that suggested it was having the worst day of its electronic life. "An identified predator loose on level 7. All personnel evacuate immediately." Jake looked at Mr. Buttons, who had settled down for a nap on the warm console, then at the aliens who were treating his cat like an escaped nuclear weapon. This was going to be a long day. News traveled fast in the galactic community, but like most news, it got more creative with each telling. What started as Earth creature causes minor incident at station became Earth predator infiltrates Galactic Council facility by the time it reached the outer colonies. General Krex, military advisor to the Galactic Defense Force, was having his morning stimulant when the report crossed his desk. As a Corthanian warrior whose species had evolved from something that looked like a cross between a rhinoceros and a very angry briefcase, Krex took security threats seriously. "A predator?" He rumbled to his aide, Lieutenant Squeaks, whose species had evolved from creatures that were apparently made of anxiety and fur. "The humans brought a biological weapon to first contact?" "According to the report, sir," It's called a cat. It demonstrated advanced infiltration capabilities, silent movement, and the ability to cause equipment failure through precise kinetic strikes. Krex's 6 eyes narrowed. Sabotage capabilities. Noted. What else? It emitted a threatening vocalization described as a low, continuous growling sound and successfully intimidated an entire diplomatic delegation. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Dr. Tentacles was having his own crisis. As the leading xenobiologist in the Peaceful Alliance, it was his job to understand new species. But the data coming in about Earth's cats made no sense. Blix, he called to his research assistant, a creature that looked like a walking mushroom with severe self-esteem issues. Then, pull up everything we have on Earth's biological weapons program. I'm not finding any evidence of a formal program, Doctor. But there are extensive records of what appear to be training exercises. Thousands of them. Show me. The holographic display lit up with what humans called cat videos. To Dr. Tentacles, they looked like psychological warfare training footage. Humans torturing cats with something called belly rubs while the creatures made threatening noises. Other videos showed humans using laser pointers to train cats in precision hunting techniques. "Dear Cosmic Void," Dr. Tentacles whispered, his tentacles writhing in distress. "They're conditioning them for combat. Look at this one. The human is repeatedly making the creature jump and attack moving targets." Blix examined the footage with the kind of focused attention usually reserved for watching paint dry or calculating taxes. "Doctor, the creature appears to be playing? Playing?" Dr. Tentacles' tone suggested Blix had just suggested the universe was made of cheese. "That's what they want you to think. Classic misdirection. The humans are clearly master strategists." Back on the station, Jake was having his own problems. Mr. Buttons had somehow gotten into the ventilation system and was now stalking through the ducts like a furry ninja, occasionally appearing at random grates to stare at passing aliens with the kind of intense focus that cats usually reserved for invisible insects. "Captain Morrison," Ambassador Veltar said, his voice carrying the kind of barely controlled panic usually reserved for natural disasters and tax audits, "we need to discuss your creature's behavior." "His behavior?" Jake looked around the corridor, where several aliens were pressed against the walls like they were trying to become one with the architecture. "He's just exploring. Cats are curious. Curious about our defensive systems, apparently," Grimjaw added, pointing to a security monitor showing Mr. Buttons sitting on top of a sensor array, calmly grooming himself. "It's been systematically investigating our infrastructure for the past hour." Jake sighed. He's looking for warm spots to nap. That's what cats do. They find the warmest, most inconvenient place possible and claim it as their personal kingdom. "Kingdom?" Veltar's feathers ruffled. "Your predator has territorial ambitions." The situation deteriorated further when Mr. Buttons decided to demonstrate his hunting instincts by stalking a small maintenance robot. The robot, sensing movement, began making evasive maneuvers while emitting distress signals. To the humans, it looked like a cat playing with a toy. To the aliens, it looked like a highly trained biological weapon conducting a tactical exercise against their technology. "It's testing our automated defenses," General Krex observed from the security feed, but his voice carrying the kind of grim satisfaction that came from being right about something terrible. "The humans have been planning this infiltration for months." "Sir," Lieutenant Squeaks ventured, "the creature appears to be batting at the robot with its paws." "Precisely. Disabling strikes designed to look playful. Brilliant camouflage." Dr. Tentacles, monitoring the situation from his lab, began updating his threat assessment. "Note the creature's behavior patterns. It demonstrates advanced reconnaissance capabilities, infrastructure analysis, and tactical patience. The humans have weaponized cuteness." As reports spread throughout the galaxy, the story grew more elaborate. The Earth creature wasn't just a predator. It was a highly trained infiltration specialist capable of psychological warfare through something called purring, and advanced enough to conduct independent operations while its human handlers maintained plausible deniability. Jake, completely unaware that he was now considered the galaxy's most dangerous man, was trying to coax Mr. Buttons out of a Jeffries tube with a can of tuna. "Here, kitty kitty," he called, while around him, the greatest military minds in the galaxy prepared for war. Mr. Buttons, for his part, was having the best day of his life. New smells, new places to explore, and aliens who clearly understood that he was the most important being in the universe. If only his human would stop making those weird noises and let him get on with his very important work of investigating everything. Admiral Blimp was having the worst day of his career, which was saying something considering he'd once accidentally declared war on a space whale. The admiral, whose species looked like someone had crossed a manatee with a filing cabinet and given it delusions of grandeur, was staring at intelligence reports that made about as much sense as a chocolate teapot. "Let me get this straight," he said to his staff, his voice carrying the weight of someone who was beginning to suspect the universe was personally mocking him. "These humans have infiltrated our most secure facility using a single biological weapon disguised as a pet?" "That's correct, sir," replied Commander Fizz, whose species had evolved from something that looked like a caffeinated ferret. "The creature, designated Mr. Buttons, successfully penetrated all our security systems and is currently conducting reconnaissance of our station infrastructure." "And our response?" "Full mobilization of the Third Fleet, sir. We're also jamming all communications to and from Earth to prevent them from coordinating additional attacks." What the Admiral didn't know was that the communication jamming had created its own set of problems. Earth's internet was still functioning, and cat videos were still being uploaded to social media platforms. The Galactic Intelligence Division, in their infinite wisdom, had decided to monitor these communications to understand the scope of Earth's biological weapons program. The results were terrifying. Intelligence analyst Glorp, whose species had evolved from creatures that appeared to be made entirely of paranoia and tentacles, was briefing the emergency council session. "Colleagues, what we're seeing is a systematic psychological warfare campaign unlike anything in recorded galactic history." The holographic display showed a compilation of cat videos that the humans had cheerfully labeled funny cat fails and cats being jerks. To the aliens, it looked like combat training footage. "This video," Glorp continued, highlighting a clip of a cat knocking objects off a table, "shows advanced object manipulation techniques. The creature is systematically testing the gravitational properties of various items." "And this one?" asked Counselor Grimjaw, pointing to a video of a cat hiding in a box. "Camouflage and concealment training. Notice how the predator can render itself nearly invisible using primitive materials." The emergency session was interrupted by a priority communication from the station. Captain Jake Morrison's face appeared on screen, looking like someone who had just realized he was in the middle of a disaster movie but hadn't been given the script. Galactic Council, we have a small problem. My cat seems to have caused some kind of panic. I'm not sure what happened, but half your station is in lockdown and the other half is demanding hazard pay." Admiral Blimp leaned forward, his bulk causing his chair to creak ominously. "Captain Morrison, are you attempting to negotiate the terms of your surrender?" "Surrender?" Jake's confusion was so genuine it almost looked fake. "I'm just trying to find my cat. He's probably napping somewhere warm. Have you checked near any heating vents? Your biological weapon is conducting thermal reconnaissance?" "My, what now?" Dr. Tentacles chose that moment to brief the Council on his latest findings. "Esteemed colleagues, I've completed my analysis of Earth's training protocols. The humans have thousands of hours of documented footage showing these creatures in various combat scenarios." He switched to a video of a cat playing with a laser pointer. "Here we see precision targeting exercises. The creature demonstrates remarkable accuracy and reflexes." "That's just a cat chasing a laser pointer," Jake said from the screen. "It's like cat entertainment." "Entertainment," Dr. Tentacles repeated slowly. "They condition their weapons through positive reinforcement, psychological manipulation at its finest." The situation reached peak absurdity when Admiral Blimp decided to demonstrate the seriousness of the threat by showing the Council security footage of Mr. Button's attack on the maintenance robot. "Observe the creature's tactical approach," the Admiral narrated as Mr. Button stalked the robot. "Silent movement, patience, and then Mr. Buttons pounced on the robot, batting at it with his paws while the robot spun in circles, both of them apparently having a great time. The precision strike, the Admiral finished triumphantly, disabling the target while maintaining the appearance of play. Textbook psychological warfare. Jake watched the footage with the expression of someone who was beginning to suspect the entire galaxy had lost its collective mind. That's just how cats play. They're not trying to hurt anyone. They're just being cats. Exactly, Admiral Blimp said, as if Jake had just confirmed his worst fears. They're so advanced they don't even realize they're weapons. Back on Earth, completely unaware of the galactic crisis they'd triggered, the internet continued its normal function of providing endless cat content. A video of a kitten failing to jump onto a couch got 10 million views and was immediately flagged by Galactic Intelligence as advanced failure recovery training. Meanwhile, the Third Fleet was positioning itself at the edge of the Sol system, preparing for what they assumed would be a desperate battle against humanity's army of weaponized pets. And Mr. Buttons, blissfully unaware that he was now considered the most dangerous creature in the galaxy, had found a nice warm spot on top of a quantum processor and was settling down for a nap. Jake looked at the assembled alien leadership, all of whom were staring at him like he was holding a thermal detonator, and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Would you like to meet him? The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for supernovas and tax collectors. The showdown took place in the station's main conference room, which had been hastily converted into what the aliens believed would be a battlefield. Security teams positioned themselves behind makeshift barriers, weapons trained on the entrance, while medical teams stood by with what they assumed were anti-venom treatments. Jake walked into the room carrying a small bag of cat treats and looking like someone who had just realized he was the star of a very weird movie. "Okay, everyone needs to stay calm," he announced to the assembled alien dignitaries, who were pressed against the far wall like they were trying to achieve fusion with the bulkhead. "I'm going to call him, and he's going to come here, and you're going to see that he's just a regular cat." "Define regular," General Krex rumbled, his 6 eyes focused on the doorway like he was expecting Armageddon to walk through it on 4 legs. "He's a cat," Jake said, with the patience of someone explaining quantum physics to a goldfish. "He eats, he sleeps, he plays, he purrs when he's happy, and he knocks things off tables because he's a cat, and that's what cats do." The psychological warfare aspects, Dr. Tentacles interjected, his tentacles writhing with nervous energy. "How do we defend against that?" "You don't need to defend against anything. Just watch." Jake opened the bag of treats and shook it gently. The sound echoed through the conference room like a dinner bell, and within seconds, Mr. Buttons appeared in the doorway. The effect was immediate. Every alien in the room either drew a weapon, activated a personal shield, or in the case of the Bloraxian delegate, began rapidly changing colors while making a sound like a broken air conditioner. Mr. Buttons, completely unimpressed by the reception, strolled into the room with the kind of casual confidence that only cats possess. He looked around at the assembled aliens, yawned, and sat down to begin washing his paw. "Threat assessment," General Krex barked to his aide. "What's it doing?" "Grooming, sir," Lieutenant Squeaks replied, his voice pitched high enough to shatter crystal, possibly preparing for combat. "He's cleaning himself," Jake said, pulling a treat from the bag. "Mr. Buttons, come here, buddy." The cat looked up at the sound of his name, saw the treat, and trotted over to Jake with the kind of focused determination usually reserved for missile guidance systems. "Observe the approach pattern," Admiral Blimp whispered to his staff. "Silent, efficient, deadly." Mr. Buttons reached Jake and stood on his hind legs, placing his front paws on Jake's leg while making a small chirping sound. "What is that noise?" Veltar squawked, his feathers ruffled to the point where he looked like he'd been electrocuted. "He's asking for the treat," Jake said, giving Mr. Buttons the small morsel. "See? Completely harmless." The cat took the treat and began eating it while purring, a sound that in the acoustics of the conference room resonated like a small engine. "The threatening vocalization," Dr. Tentacles observed, his tentacles quivering. It's expressing satisfaction with its successful infiltration. It's purring, Jake said, and then did something that made every alien in the room either gasp, scream, or begin praying to whatever deities their species worshipped. He reached down and began petting the cat. Stop. General Krex roared. You're triggering its combat responses. But instead of attacking, Mr. Buttons leaned into the petting, his purring growing louder, his eyes half closed in contentment. He likes it, Jake said, scratching behind the cat's ears. This is what cats do when they're happy. They purr, they want attention, Mr. Buttons, deciding that Jake's attention was insufficient, flopped onto his side and began rolling around on the floor, exposing his belly while continuing to purr. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for moments of profound revelation or really awkward dinner parties. Is it showing submission? Admiral Blimp asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He's asking for belly rubs, Jake said, kneeling down to oblige. Cats do this when they trust you completely. It's the most vulnerable position they can be in. Dr. Tentacles watched in fascination as Jake gently rubbed the cat's belly while Mr. Buttons stretched and purred even louder. This makes no sense, the doctor said, his tentacles writhing in confusion. According to our intelligence, these creatures are highly trained infiltration specialists. Your intelligence was wrong, Jake said, continuing to pet the cat. They're just pets. Companions. They don't do anything except eat, sleep, play, and demand attention. But the combat training videos, analyst Glorp protested. The precision targeting exercises. You mean the laser pointer games? Jake pulled out his phone and activated the laser pointer app. You mean this? The red dot appeared on the wall, and Mr. Buttons immediately focused on it with the intensity of a guided missile. But instead of looking threatening, he looked like what he was, a cat about to pounce on a moving light. He's acquiring the target, General Krex said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Mr. Buttons pounced at the dot, missed, looked confused, and then sat down to lick his paw as if the whole thing had been beneath his dignity anyway. His tactical retreat, Admiral Blimp observed weakly. He missed, Jake said. Cats miss sometimes. They're not perfect killing machines. They're just cats. The revelation hit the assembled aliens like a cold shower. Their great threat, their reason for mobilizing fleets and declaring martial law, was a small furry creature that wanted belly rubs and occasionally failed to catch a light dot. So when you said Earth has billions of these creatures, Counselor Grimjaw said slowly, you meant? We have billions of pets, Jake confirmed, house cats specifically. They live in our homes, sleep on our furniture, and demand food at inconvenient times. They're not weapons. They're family. Dr. Tentacles tentatively extended one tentacle toward Mr. Buttons, who sniffed it curiously and then began rubbing against it, purring. It's actually quite pleasant, the doctor admitted. And that's how the greatest military mobilization in galactic history was ended by one orange tabby cat who just wanted some attention and a warm place to nap. The aftermath of what historians would later call the Great Cat Incident was a masterpiece of bureaucratic damage control. The Galactic Council found themselves in the awkward position of having to explain to their constituents why they'd mobilized 3 fleets against a pet. Ambassador Veltar, his feathers now permanently ruffled from stress, was holding an emergency press conference. The recent mobilization was a precautionary measure based on incomplete intelligence regarding Earth's cultural practices. Are you saying you declared a military alert because of a house cat? Asked a reporter from the Galactic News Network, whose species had evolved from creatures that appeared to be made entirely of skepticism and journalism degrees. The situation was more complex than that, Veltar replied, his voice carrying the weight of someone who knew his political career was probably over. There were communication issues. Meanwhile, Admiral Blimp was facing his own crisis. The Third Fleet was still positioned at the edge of the Sol system, and he had to figure out how to explain to his crews that they were no longer preparing for war against Earth's biological weapons program. Attention all ships, he announced over the fleet communication system. The threat level has been downgraded. The Earth creatures are not as dangerous as initially assessed. Sir, came a voice from the flagship's bridge. Are you saying we've been at battle stations because of pets? Stand down from battle stations, Admiral Blimp replied, and then added quietly, yes. Back on the station, Jake was discovering that being the most feared human in the galaxy came with unexpected perks. Aliens who had been treating him like a dangerous primitive were now regarding him with a mixture of respect and terror. Captain Morris and Dr. Tentacles said, approaching with the kind of cautious respect usually reserved for handling unstable explosives, would it be possible to study your companion further? For scientific purposes, of course. Jake looked down at Mr. Buttons, who was currently engaged in his favorite activity of looking supremely unimpressed with everything around him. Sure, but he's not going to do anything exciting. He's a cat. He's a cat. Yes, but what else do you have on Earth? General Krex asked, his tone suggesting he was expecting the answer to be dragon-tiger hybrids or weaponized houseplants. Well, we also have dogs, Jake said innocently. The effect was immediate. Every alien in the room either took a step back or reached for their communication devices. Dogs? Veltar's voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to the prom. What are dogs? Jake grinned. They're bigger than cats, they're incredibly loyal, and they're basically wolves that we domesticated. Oh, and they love everyone. Some of them are the size of small horses. Wolves? General Krex's 6 eyes widened. You domesticated wolves? Well, technically wolves domesticated themselves by hanging around humans, but yeah, basically. We've got everything from tiny dogs that can fit in your pocket to giant ones that weigh more than some of you guys. Dr. Tentacles began making rapid notes. Domesticated wolves. Various sizes. How many of these creatures does Earth have? Oh, hundreds of millions. Pretty much every family has either a cat or a dog. Sometimes both. Sometimes more than one of each. The silence that followed was deafening. And birds, Jake continued, warming to his subject. We keep birds as pets too. Parrots, canaries, cockatiels. Some people keep reptiles. Snakes, lizards, that sort of thing. Snakes, Admiral Blimp repeated weakly. And fish. Lots of people keep fish. Oh, and some people keep spiders as pets. Spiders. Counselor Grimjaw's voice was barely a whisper. There's also rabbits, hamsters, guinea pigs, ferrets. Jake paused, noticing that several aliens were beginning to look like they needed medical attention. Are you guys okay? Captain Morrison, Veltar said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had just realized he was standing at the edge of an abyss. Exactly how many species has humanity domesticated? Jake thought about it. I don't know. Hundreds? We've been keeping animals as companions for thousands of years. It's kind of our thing. The revelation that Earth was essentially a planet of animal trainers who had successfully domesticated hundreds of species sent shockwaves through the galactic community. The humans weren't just keeping one type of predator as a pet. They were running what amounted to a planet-wide zoo of potentially dangerous creatures. We need to reassess our entire relationship with Earth, General Krex announced. These humans are clearly the most successful species in the galaxy when it comes to interspecies relations. So, Jake said, looking around at the assembled alien leadership, does this mean we're still welcome in the Alliance? Veltar straightened his feathers and assumed what he probably thought was a diplomatic posture. Captain Morrison, the Galactic Council would be honored to have humanity as a full member of our alliance. Equal status. No probationary period. And Admiral Blimp added, we'd like to discuss the possibility of cultural exchange programs. Perhaps some of your animal handling techniques. Jake grinned. I think I can arrange that. But I should probably warn you. Next week we're supposed to have a cultural exchange where you meet some of our other animals. Other animals? Dr. Tentacles asked, his tentacles writhing with what might have been excitement or terror. Yeah, we're bringing a delegation of therapy dogs. They're specially trained to help people feel better. Big, friendly, incredibly gentle creatures that love meeting new people. The assembled aliens exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their collective mental state. Perhaps, Veltar suggested carefully, we should start with just one dog. Sure, Jake agreed. I'll bring Boomer. He's a golden retriever. About 80 pounds, loves everyone, and has never met a stranger. As the meeting concluded and the aliens began making what appeared to be frantic calls to their respective governments, Jake looked down at Mr. Buttons, who had fallen asleep during the proceedings. Well, buddy, he said quietly, looks like you just changed the course of galactic history. Mr. Buttons opened one eye, gave Jake a look that clearly said, of course I did. I'm a cat, and went back to sleep. And that's how humanity joined the Galactic Alliance, not as a junior member species, but as the most terrifying civilization in the galaxy, a species so advanced that they had successfully weaponized cuteness and turned every planet into a training ground for biological warfare specialists. The fact that they called it having pets only made them more frightening. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Ambassador Morrison for his successful intimidation tactics, would go on to become the most respected diplomat in galactic history. Mr. Buttons remained unimpressed by the whole affair and continued his important work of napping in inconvenient places and demanding attention at inappropriate times. After all, someone had to keep the galaxy in line,